Elena Blackwood pressed her forehead against the cold window of her tiny studio apartment, watching the rain cascade down the glass like tears. At 27, she felt as though life had forgotten her completely. Her photography career was crumbling, her bank account nearly empty, and the eviction notice on her kitchen table served as a cruel reminder of her failures. The vintage camera her grandfather had left her sat unused on the shelf, mocking her creative drought and financial desperation. The knock came at exactly midnight, sharp and confident against her weather door. Elena wrapped her thin cardigan tighter around her body as she peered through the peephole. A man in an expensive charcoal suit stood in the dim hallway, his presence commanding even in the shadows. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, and when he looked up toward the camera, she felt her breath catch in her throat. "Miss Blackwood," his voice carried through the door, deep and smooth like aged bourbon. "My name is Adrian Cross. I have a proposition that could change both our lives." Elena's hands trembled as she cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock attached. "It's very late, Mr. Cross. Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested." "I'm not selling anything." He held up a leather portfolio. "I'm offering you something you desperately need. Financial freedom." Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. Against every instinct screaming danger, she unlatched the chain and stepped back. Adrian Cross entered her modest space, and suddenly, the small apartment felt impossibly intimate. His presence filled the room like electricity before a thunderstorm. "You're even more beautiful than your photograph suggested," he said softly, his emerald eyes traveling over her face with an intensity that made her skin flush. "What photographs? I don't understand what this is about." Elena pulled her cardigan closer, suddenly aware of her thin pajamas beneath. Adrian set his portfolio on her coffee table and turned to face her completely. "I've been researching you, Elena. Your work, your character, your current situation. I know about the eviction notice, the gallery that rejected your latest portfolio, the fact that you've been surviving on coffee and hope for weeks." Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. "How could you possibly know that? And why would a stranger care about my problems?" "Because I need a wife, and you need a miracle." His words were direct, cutting through any pretense. "It's a business arrangement. 2 years of marriage. You'll receive $3 million, your debts cleared immediately, and complete freedom to pursue your photography without financial worry." Elena sank onto her worn couch, her legs suddenly weak. "You're completely insane. We don't even know each other." "That's precisely why it's perfect." Adrian sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, something masculine and intoxicating that made her head spin. No messy emotions, no complications. Just a mutually beneficial contract. "But why me? You could marry anyone." Damien's smile was enigmatic, but something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "I've done extensive research. You're honest, talented, and most importantly, you won't fall in love with me." "I don't do relationships, Elena. I tried once, and it destroyed everything I cared about. This arrangement protects us both." The certainty in his voice stirred something rebellious in her chest. "You seem awfully confident about that." "I am." But his gaze lingered on her lips a moment too long, betraying a crack in his armor. Elena stared at the contract he'd placed before her, the numbers swimming before her tired eyes. $3 million. It would solve every problem plaguing her existence and give her the freedom to create without the constant fear of survival. "What would you expect from me?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Public appearances as my wife, business dinners, social events, charity galas. We'd live together in my penthouse, but you'd have your own space, your own darkroom. Complete privacy when we're not playing our roles. And physically?" The question escaped before she could stop it, and heat flooded her face. Damien's eyes darkened with something dangerous. "What happens between us privately would be entirely your choice. I would never pressure you into anything you didn't want." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "But I won't pretend I don't find you incredibly attractive." The air between them crackled with tension. Elena found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by an invisible magnetic force she couldn't understand or resist. "This is completely crazy," she whispered. "Sometimes crazy is exactly what we need to break free." Damien reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers warm against her cool skin. "What do you say, Elena? Will you take this chance with me?" Her heart pounded so hard she was certain he could hear it echoing in the small space between them. "I need time to think, of course, but I need your answer by tomorrow night. I have lawyers standing by, and we could be married within a week if you agree. Why the rush?" Damien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Business complications that require immediate resolution. The details aren't important. What matters is whether you're brave enough to take this leap of faith." After he left, Elena paced her apartment until dawn, his proposal spinning through her mind like a fever dream. She called her sister, who thought she'd lost her sanity completely. She stared at her empty refrigerator, her pile of overdue bills, her unused camera equipment, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Damien's intense emerald gaze and felt the electric touch of his fingers against her skin. The way he'd looked at her like she was something precious, something worth saving. The next evening, Damien returned as promised. This time, Elena was ready. She'd spent extra time on her appearance, choosing her best dress and taking care with her makeup. When she opened the door, she saw his eyes darken with unmistakable appreciation. "You look stunning," he said, his voice rougher than before. "I've made my decision," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. Damien turned to face her, and she could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful hope he was trying to hide. Elena took a deep breath, knowing her next words would change everything. "Yes, I'll marry you." The relief that washed over his features was quickly masked, but she'd seen it. "You won't regret this, Elena. I'll take care of you. This is a business arrangement," she reminded him firmly, though her heart was racing at the intensity in his eyes. "Nothing more, of course," he agreed, but the way he was looking at her suggested it might not be as simple as either of them wanted to believe. Dangerous Desiree. The wedding ceremony took place 5 days later in an intimate chapel overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Elena wore an elegant ivory silk dress that Damien had chosen for her, along with diamond earrings that probably cost more than she'd made in the past year. He looked devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, and when he took her hand at the altar, she felt that familiar jolt of electricity shoot straight to her core. "Do you, Adrian Cross, take Elena Blackwood to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the officiant asked. "I do." His voice was steady, controlled, but his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Do you, Elena Blackwood, take Adrian Cross to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," she whispered, her voice barely audible over her thundering heartbeat. "You may kiss the bride." Damien stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. "Trust me," he whispered against her lips, his breath warm and intoxicating. The kiss was supposed to be ceremonial, brief, for show. Instead, it was pure fire. Elena felt herself melting into him as his mouth moved against hers with barely restrained hunger. She forgot about the small gathering of witnesses, forgot about their contract, forgot everything except the way he tasted like promises and danger. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. The applause around them seemed to come from very far away. "Mrs. Cross," he murmured against her ear, and the way he said her new name sent shivers down her spine. The reception was elegant, but small, held at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the ocean. Damien never left her side, his hand always touching her, somehow her back, her arm, her hand. Each touch sent sparks through her body, and she found herself craving more contact, more of whatever this magnetic pull between them was. "You're a natural at this," he murmured in her ear during their first dance, his arm tightening around her waist. "At what? Being your wife? At making this feel real." His voice was strained, and she could feel the tension in his body as they swayed to the music. "Maybe that's because it is starting to feel real," she admitted, her lips brushing against his neck. Damien's breath hissed out. "Elena, you're making this very difficult for me." "Ling, what difficult?" Remembering this is supposed to be just business. As the evening wore on, the sexual tension between them grew thicker, more impossible to ignore. Every glance was charged with desire. Every accidental touch sent heat pulling low in her belly. By the time they arrived at Damien's penthouse, Elena was practically vibrating with need. The penthouse was breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern art on the walls, and an elegance that took her breath away. But none of it mattered when Damien turned to face her in the foyer. "Elena," he said, his voice rough with barely controlled desire, "if you want me to show you to your room and leave you alone, tell me now. Because in about 5 seconds, I'm going to kiss you again. And this time I might not be able to stop." She looked at this man, who was now her husband, this beautiful stranger who had offered her everything she'd ever dreamed of. She thought about their contract, about all the reasons this was dangerous territory. Then she stepped closer to him. "Then don't stop," she whispered. Damien groaned and pulled her into his arms, his mouth claiming hers with desperate hunger. This time, there was no audience, no pretense, nothing but raw desire and the magnetic pull that had been building between them since that first night. "Are you sure?" he asked against her lips, his hands tangling in her hair. Instead of answering with words, Elena began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling with anticipation. Damien's breath caught as her hands touched his bare chest, and she felt powerful and desired in a way she'd never experienced before. "Trust me," he whispered again. Echoing his words from the altar. As Damien lifted her into his arms and carried her toward his bedroom, Elena realized she was about to cross a line that would change everything between them. This marriage might have started as a business deal, but what was happening now was anything but business. But before they could reach the bedroom, Damien's phone rang with an urgent tone he couldn't ignore. His face darkened as he read the message. "What's wrong?" Elena asked, still breathless from their kisses. "There's something I need to tell you. Something about why I really needed this marriage so urgently." Damien set her down gently, his expression troubled. "I wasn't completely honest with you, Elena." Cold dread washed over her. "What do you mean?" "I'm being blackmailed. My ex-business partner, Victoria Reeves, discovered some information about my company's early investments. She threatened to destroy everything I've built unless I married her and signed over controlling interest in my company." Elena felt sick. "So you married me instead?" "Yes, but not just to escape her threats." Damien reached for her hands. "I chose you specifically because I was already drawn to you. I'd seen your work at galleries, watched you from across rooms at photography exhibitions. There was something about your passion, your dedication to your art that fascinated me. You've been watching me. I've been admiring you," he corrected. "And when I needed to find a wife quickly, you were the only person I wanted to ask. The marriage contract solved both our problems, but what's happening between us now was never part of the plan." Before Elena could respond, the elevator in the penthouse opened, and a woman stepped out. Victoria Reeves was everything Elena wasn't: tall, blonde, coldly beautiful, with the kind of polished perfection that money could buy. Well, Victoria said, her voice like poison honey. "The happy couple. I must say, Damien, your taste has certainly become more pedestrian. How did you get up here?" Damien demanded, moving protectively in front of Elena. "I have my ways, and I have a proposition for your little bride." Victoria's smile was cruel as she turned her attention to Elena. "Did your husband tell you about our history? How he owes his entire fortune to investments I helped arrange? Or how those investments were funded through some very questionable channels?" "Those deals were completely legal," Damien said through gritted teeth. "Legal, perhaps. But how would they look in the media? And more importantly, how would your sweet little photographer feel if she knew her marriage is nothing but an elaborate tax shelter designed to protect assets from a federal investigation?" Elena felt the world tilting around her. What is she talking about? Victoria pulled out a tablet, showing financial documents and photographs. "Your husband is under investigation for money laundering, dear. This marriage is his way of transferring assets to you before the government can freeze his accounts. You're not his wife. You're his accomplice." "That's not true," Damien said desperately, reaching for Elena. "The investigation is groundless. Victoria's trying to frame me because I refused her partnership offer." "Prove it," Victoria challenged. "Show her the real documents, Damien. Show her why you really needed to marry someone so quickly." As Elena looked between them, seeing the truth and lies tangled together in ways she couldn't unravel, She realized that her fairy tale marriage was about to become something much more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. Trust and forever. Elena stared at the documents Victoria had spread across Damien's glass coffee table, her mind reeling from the implications. Bank transfers, offshore accounts, meeting records, it all painted a picture of financial complexity she couldn't fully understand, but the implications were clear enough. Elena, me explain, Damien said, his voice tight with desperation. Yes, there's a federal investigation, but it's completely unfounded. Victoria is the one who set up those offshore accounts without my knowledge when we were partners. She's trying to frame me to force my hand. How convenient, Victoria purred, settling into one of his expensive armchairs like she owned the place. And I suppose you have proof of my supposed scheme? As a matter of fact, I do. Damien moved to his home office and returned with his own set of documents. Elena, I've been working with federal investigators for months to expose Victoria's illegal activities. The marriage wasn't about hiding assets, it was about protecting you from becoming a target. When Victoria realized I was cooperating with the authorities, Victoria's confident facade cracked slightly. You're lying. Agent Morrison can verify everything, Damien said, pulling out his phone. Elena, I should have told you the truth from the beginning, but I was trying to keep you safe. Victoria has a history of hurting people who get in her way. Elena sank onto the couch, overwhelmed by revelations and counter-revelations. Stop. Both of you, just stop. She looked up at Damien, seeing the fear in his eyes, not fear for himself, but fear of losing her. If you're telling the truth, why didn't you trust me with it from the beginning? Because I was falling in love with you, Damien admitted, his voice breaking. And I was terrified that if you knew how dangerous the situation was, you'd run. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you before I'd even had the chance to win your heart. Victoria laughed coldly. How touching. But it doesn't matter now. I have enough evidence to destroy both of you. Unless, of course, we can come to an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Elena asked, surprising both Damien and Victoria. Smart girl. I want Damien's cooperation in transferring certain assets to accounts I control. In exchange, I disappear forever and you two can play house to your heart's content. Absolutely not, Damien said firmly. I won't help you steal money from innocent investors. Elena stood up slowly, her photographer's eye taking in every detail of Victoria's body language, every micro-expression that revealed the truth beneath the polished facade. Suddenly, she smiled. Victoria, you made one crucial mistake, Elena said, pulling out her phone. And what's that, dear? You assumed I was just a naive little artist who wouldn't think to protect herself. Elena turned her phone screen toward them, showing a recording app that had been running. I've been recording this entire conversation, including your admission to setting up illegal offshore accounts and your current blackmail attempt. Victoria's face went white. You little bitch. Actually, I prefer Mrs. Cross, Elena said sweetly. And I think Agent Morrison would be very interested in hearing this recording, don't you think, darling? Damien stared at his wife in amazement and growing admiration. Elena, you're incredible. I'm a photographer, Damien. I document truth. And the truth is that Victoria just confessed to multiple federal crimes while trying to frame my husband. Victoria lunged for Elena's phone, but Damien caught her wrist. I'd stop right there if I were you. Elena's already uploaded that recording to cloud storage. Even destroying her phone won't help you now. Realizing she was trapped, Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. This isn't over. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I do. Agent Morrison's voice came from behind them. Elena had texted him during Victoria's confession, and he'd used Damien's private elevator access to arrive unnoticed. Victoria Reeves, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, blackmail, and fraud. As the FBI agents led Victoria away, Elena and Damien finally found themselves alone in the penthouse. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they hadn't yet said. So, Elena said finally, there anything else I should know about my husband? Secret identities? Hidden treasure? Long-lost evil twins? Damien laughed, the sound shaky with relief and exhaustion. Just that I'm completely, desperately in love with my incredibly clever wife. Even though I almost destroyed your careful plan by recording Victoria? Especially because of that, Damien pulled her into his arms. Elena, what you did tonight proves something I already knew, but was afraid to believe we're better together than we ever could be apart. You saw through her lies. You protected both of us. And you did it without hesitation. I was protecting my husband, Elena said simply. That's what wives do, right? Real wives do, Damien agreed, his voice growing serious. Elena, I need you to know that everything I feel for you is real. The attraction, the respect, the love, none of that was part of any contract or arrangement. You've become the most important thing in my life. Elena reached up and touched his face gently. Damien, when I said yes to your proposal, I thought I was agreeing to a business deal. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about the money or the security. It became about you, about us. Does that mean you'll stay? Not because of the contract, but because you want to. Instead of answering with words, Elena kissed him. This kiss was different from all the others, not desperate or hungry or tinged with uncertainty, but deep and sure and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling. I love you, Adrian Cross, she whispered against his lips. I love you too, Elena Cross, and I promise, no more secrets between us. From now on, complete honesty about everything. Everything? She asked, with a mischievous glint in her eye. Well, almost everything. I might keep the location of your anniversary present a secret. Anniversary present? We've been married for exactly 1 day, which means we have many, many anniversaries to celebrate, Damien said, lifting her into his arms. Starting with tonight, as he carried her toward their bedroom, not his bedroom or her bedroom, but theirs. Elena marveled at how much her life had changed. A week ago, she'd been alone and struggling. Now, she had love, security, and a partner who challenged and supported her in equal measure. Damien, she said as he set her down beside their bed. Yes, next time you need help with anything, just ask. No elaborate schemes, no mysterious contracts, just honesty from the beginning. I promise, he said solemnly. Though I have to say, our elaborate scheme led us to something pretty amazing. It did, Elena agreed, beginning to unbutton his shirt. But I think the best part of our story is just beginning. As the city lights sparkled beyond their windows, and the man she loved looked at her like she hung the moon and stars, Elena knew she'd found something worth more than all the contracts and arrangements in the world. She'd found her home, her partner, and her forever in the arms of the mysterious stranger who'd appeared at her door with an impossible proposition. Trust me, Damien whispered again, echoing the words that had begun their real journey together. Always, Elena whispered back, and knew she meant it with every beat of her heart. And as the night wrapped around them like silk, Elena lost herself once again in Damien's arms, knowing this time it wasn't just passion or desire or the thrill of the unknown. This time, it was love in its purest, most powerful form, the kind that transforms two separate lives into one beautiful, shared adventure. Their story had begun with a contract, but it would continue with something far more binding and infinitely more precious, a love built on trust, honesty, and the unshakable certainty that they were meant to face whatever came next together.